several things on there. And I think one person's coming to guest speak for us too, right? Or present. Not guest speak, but I guess guest speakers. So, all right, Mr. City Manager, we'll go ahead and start with community promotions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everybody. It's good to be with you tonight. The first item that we have on the agenda tonight, as the mayor mentioned, is community promotions. This is a follow-up item as it relates to the new partnership that we've discussed in concept, at least, with Visit Casper. And if you'll recall, this is the opportunity that we're hoping to take wherein members of this, the city team and the Visit Casper team can get together and consider applications for funding and so on that bring activity to our community from out of town. We're very excited about this, and in the work that we've done since that time, we've come up with some questions and ideas and suggestions as it relates to getting this off the ground and getting it started, of which Ms. Tremmel, who is our liaison, if you will, to this group, would report on here in just a minute. Some of the questions I'd like you to keep your ear to the ground for would be with regard to the level of in-kind funding and out-of-pocket type funding that the city would want to consider. Oftentimes what that involves is rental fees for city facilities, overtime costs for police or street staff or whatever. And as I understand it, we're kind of getting out of the cash business, which I think is a good development and a positive direction to go. The other thing that I would ask you to consider is exactly how much you'd want to put forward by way of a budget, in that while a lot of this will be in kind and those kinds of things, we may still need to put together some funding in order to keep our respective funds whole pertaining to what it is that might be requested of the city to support. So those are some things that have you keep in mind. With that table being set, if it pleases the council, I'd like to defer to Ms. Tremmel to walk us through a lot of the other details here.
You bet. Council, okay? All right.
Your honors, members of council. So as city manager stated, I am here just to report on the community promotions process as it stands currently. So as the memo stated, we are looking to start a little review board. We would like 2 members, and mayor has selected 2 members to join the board, along with a staff person and then members from Visit Casper. We hope to release the applications, which were attached in draft form, out on April 15th. And then there would be several weeks that people would be able to turn those in. The review board will meet, go over all of those, and essentially fund them. Tonight, we asked council to look at the amount they would like to consider to budget, and then that amount will be given to Visit Casper as of FY23. At this time, I can answer any questions or go over in detail any other parts.
Yeah, go ahead, Bruce.
I noticed we're not doing, they're going to want their funding. So how much cash did we use how much of that 25,000 was used for cash? Since we're not doing the cash anymore, now it's just going to be in-kind and facilities grants. So if we take the cash out of it, how much does that amount to?
So, Your Honor, previous years we budgeted a total of 25,000, which covered cash and facilities and in-kind.
Correct.
So of that, I can't remember the last year. I'd have to pull the exact figures, but it was under $10,000 that was cash, and then the rest 15. I think it was quite a bit under. I think it was closer to 7. But I would have to pull those numbers for you, and I can pull those back.
The only reason I ask is because if we've always given them 25,000 and it included cash, and we're not doing cash anymore, it would seem prudent to give them, what, 15 or 17 now, as opposed to the full 25, since we're not doing the cash anymore. That's what I was getting at.
Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. So when I'm thinking about this, to me, in-kind services do not bear the same type of burden to the city as cash contributions are. So I don't think we need to subtract that off, because while we may be moving cash from one account to another to make sure that the accounts stay where they are, it's really not necessarily money that we are losing out of pocket. So I would like to see that we maintain our levels or even consider, I think that we can be relatively freer with our in-kind contributions as it relates to facility fees and that sort of thing, where we don't have hard costs in the overtime wages and that sort of thing. So to me, it would make sense to, I think we should come up with a split of some variety, because in my mind at least, and maybe this is the wrong way of thinking about it, but when we think about how it impacts the actual amount of money that the city is on the hook for, it looks different when we're talking about services that we have to pay people for compared to fees at a facility that might otherwise just be sitting empty. So to me, it would make sense to have a split, maybe lean a little heavier on the facility side of things, a little lighter on the overtime wages and that sort of thing. But we're not losing anything if we're allowing an organization to use a facility that otherwise might not be being used.
Vice Mayor.
Two things. Fleur, in this Casper Impact Grant application itself, it says that we used to give, there's no minimum or maximum amount that can be requested. However, the average cash award with this program is $2,500. That's per application, correct?
Yes, and that is coming from Visit Casper's numbers, not ours.
Okay.
Our average was never 2,500.
Okay. Then the second thing that I would add is that with the amount that we have given in the past, even though we're going away from cash, we're also condensing. They used to come to us, they'd go to Visit Casper, they had multiple stops that they can make. Now we're doing a one-stop shop. So to me, by cutting it back, I disagree with that, because they only get one shot at it now, not three. So personally myself, I'd like to leave where it is, and obviously we don't have the cash in there, but I'd like to leave it where it's at. And
Okay. Yes.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this vein of discussion, I think, is important to bring up a point in conjunction with. One of the things that we've talked about is whether or not these entities are going to be making money and what their true need is going to be and those kinds of things. I would suggest that one of the proposals, or elements of the proposal anyway, is that of awarding 50% of the fees that we would be forgiving, if you will, so that indeed, if there is a level of earnings that they would be getting back as a result of the event, a tournament is a good example, whatever that looks like for user groups, they would have some skin in the game by way of having to provide at least 50% of whatever it is that we would be foregoing in terms of rental fees that we would otherwise get or not be getting if the facility were not to be used at that time otherwise. So the question I suppose I'm asking is whether or not that 50% concept is something you can get behind. And secondly, whether or not you are comfortable foregoing the other 50% and essentially forgiving that aspect of revenue that we would otherwise be getting if, in fact, that facility were to be used by another purpose. So it's kind of a twofold question.
Okay, I'll throw that on the table for the council. Amber.
I'll raise your question another question. I'm wondering if that's not something, if council sets the parameters for how we'd like to see this, if that's not sort of that sliding scale sort of concept, if that's not something that we could say is at the disposal of this group that we put together. Perhaps there's one group that needs 100% of those facility fees taken care of, and perhaps there's another one that maybe 25% is enough of an incentive to get them here. And so I wonder if that might be something, as long as nobody's exceeding the amount that we've set, that we might leave to the discretion of the group that's evaluating the applications.
Steve, Kathy.
Well, the one thing that I would want to point out is we do have hard costs in these things. So it isn't all just transferring money from one pocket to another, Because if they ask for police, that's overtime, that's hard money we're paying out. If they ask for refuse, that's hard money we're paying out to deliver and pick up trash containers. If they're asking for street cleaning, that's a hard cost. So there are definitely hard costs that are associated with all of these grants. If they ask for the event center, we have event staff that are all part-time people that come up for security, for first aid, that are not normally there. So even the event center, even though it may not be being used, it does wind up turning into a hard cost for the city to pay those employees that are called in to work part-time. So all of these things, even though we're giving them to a point, they are costing the city out of the general fund hard dollars, because the dollars would have to be transferred from general fund to either bail fill or refuse collection. But anyhow, those would be hard dollars that would come out of the general fund.
Do you have anything? Oh, okay. Bruce?
Carter, I understand the 50%. It's hard to sit here and think that we're gonna give somebody, and I understand it brings stuff into the city, but when we're giving somebody a break on what they have to pay for our facilities, and then they turn around and make money on it, that's just a hard thing to stomach. I don't know any taxpayer that wouldn't come and use our stuff to make money and not have to pay for it. So I don't know how you discern that. I don't know how you sliding scale it. I don't know what parameters you use, but I think you're on the right track. I just don't know how that's discernible, if that makes sense to you.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, you're asking a good question, and this is a very important element of discussion, I think. Certainly, the 50% has been a guideline that the council has used for a number of years with the community promotions program. The sliding scale concept would definitely be a newer concept, but it could go the distance in terms of figuring out true need and reimbursing accordingly. Mr. Mayor, do you mind if I ask Fleur what level of discussion you've had along those conversations between you and Visit Casper, please?
So when we spoke to Visit Casper, the sliding scale, we talked about the sliding scale. There was discussion of exactly that, people who are bringing in money, not wanting, they might not come to Casper. So when we see the bigger tournaments, you have to try and get those people to come. And one of the reasons you might be able to get them to come to Casper versus another location is because we have all these programs that could help cover the cost. And so just because they make money, if we don't give them that money, they might not be willing to come to Casper. And so that was a discussion. And then they come in, we give them a little bit of money, but we end up making money. So for example, if it's at the event center, we would make money off concessions, and it might end up being a wash, the amount that we give them. And so that was where the discussion went, as far as should we be giving any up to 50% if they're making money? And that's why we set it at up to 50% for people. So I think council can decide what they feel comfortable with, and then especially with regard to the hard costs, if that's something we want to include in that, or if that's going to be a different scale. I think we could decide that, council can decide that, and then the review board can make sure that that is followed.
Any other questions, comments? So I guess tonight, what do you need? Do you need us to give you direction? Would that be beneficial?
I think we need a budget amount. We would like to see that,
Okay.
the amount that you want to budget. And then if you want to let us know, I heard somebody mention the hard costs. And so if that's something you want to consider, whether you want us to include that in that, or if those should be taken out of community promotions, or maybe you just want to set amount that, like, they have to pay 50% of hard costs, or some sort of rule like that, that we could then follow on the review board.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Bruce.
I guess on Steve's train of thought, if we give the full 25,000 we always have, that's really like giving them a raise, because the cash that used to go out won't be going out anymore. So that entire 25,000 would be for in-kind and facilities, correct? So that would be like giving them a raise if we gave them the full 25,000, correct?
Mr. Mayor, it kind of depends, Councilman, on how you would like to see it happen, because the reality is council could say, let's set 25,000 if that's a number you're comfortable with, aside for the city's hard costs. And the council could then also say, whatever it is we don't get by way of facility rental and those kinds of things, you're simply foregoing that revenue opportunity and wouldn't necessarily have a cost out of that 25,000. Unless you want to see that loss in revenue accounted for, and in which case that would become a part of the 25,000. So it really depends on where you want to go. I would definitely say, though, to Councilman Cathy's point, we do need the hard costs covered. And I would ask that you consider that at the very, very least.
Well, like, just as a follow-up, I almost feel like Kyle's saying this, but I wish I had a case-by-case situation where we had hard numbers to, you know, we had the numbers to show, you know, we might be giving up the facilities costs and even the hard costs, but they're bringing in $100,000 into our city in tax base. How do we know? So that's, I guess we would have to leave that to the discretion of the two people that are going to be on that committee so that they can weigh the cost. We'll just have to put our faith in them, I guess, right?
Yeah. Amber?
To that point, I think that that's the advantage that we're gaining here by partnering with them, is that we can start to develop some of that actual case by case, this thing brought in this amount and this is what it cost us. So we may not have that clarity for this year going in, but I do think that's something that we can develop. And so if there's, you know, I think that if there's a general will of the council to say, you know, we don't want our out-of-pocket hard costs to be any more than this, then, and setting that hard parameter, then we can leave some room for discretion for the board to look at these individual cases to make, you know, to distinguish among them, because in reality, if our hard costs, let's say, are 50% of what we would typically charge for I'm making that number up, but if they're 50% of what we typically charge for a rental fee, and we charge somebody 0, and we charge somebody else 100, we've now covered the hard costs for both of those groups by sliding the scale around. So we've gotten both groups in, accomplished our goal, and still covered the hard costs without making each group pay 50%. So if we have a set amount, a set budget that we can play with and give some latitude to the board to make case-by-case decisions, knowing that the full total package needs to add up to no more than what the council has set, I think that, you know, we have more flexibility to make this program work in the way that we like to see it work.
So I agree with Amber. I think we have to look at that. And what is our threshold? What are we looking at that we want to? Is that what you're going to need tonight, Fleur? Is a threshold?
Yes.
Go ahead, Amber.
When we were calculating the 25,000 before, were we calculating the total value of the in-kind services rendered or the cost of the services rendered?
Mr. Mayor, council members, actually both. That's right. So facility costs, if we had 50% of them, any of the hard costs, and then of course cash. So that was meant to capture all of them.
Can we keep it at 25,000 as a threshold? I mean, is that something that, I mean, if we're going to look at a hard cost, I mean, is 25,000 something that we can live with? Yeah, go ahead.
That's what I think we should do, in that won't cost us any more this year than it's cost us the last however many years, and it gives us the, you know, we keep the burden on the general fund at the same level, so there would be no surprises there, and then see what, if we, my intention with this idea is to be able to increase the impact for the same amount of dollars going out the door. And so I think this would give us a chance to see if we are able to do that through this partnership without costing any more money. I don't think we should mess with the figure too much, or else we won't really know if we're increasing our impact or not.
Steve, Cathy.
I have no problem with sticking with the 25. My comment I was going to make is talking about this sliding scale of funding one 100 and the other one 50 or none and all of this. And unfortunately, people are people and people get jealous. And as soon as we start doing that, we're going to start coming back to that committee with, well, you funded them 50 and you funded them 25. Why did you only, and that's where that's going to turn into, is one of those contests. So I think we ought to set a limit and, 50%, 20%, 40, I don't care, but I think we ought to set a number that sets across the board to everybody and try to keep that committee out of the middle of that particular contest.
Lisa?
Is there any way that we can get some kind of an average for the hard costs over the years for some of these? I think that some of them are larger and that they've used a lot more of the hard cost personnel, police officers and stuff. Because, I mean, we've only done this once, and I think we're all just trying to draw off of that one experience, but we really have no idea of how those were broke out.
Your Honor, sure.
Great. Thank you. Steve, I know you had a question. Did you want to wait till we voted?
You can vote.
Okay, all right. Okay, so what I'm hearing is that we can set our hard cost at 25,000. Is that okay? Is council okay with that? Okay. Steve, your recommendation was to keep it at 50%, 40% or 50%?
Oh, I just threw the numbers out, but I know we have stayed at 50, so we're sticking with our 25 from past years. Let's go ahead and stick with the 50 for this first year as a starting point and go from there.
Oh, go ahead, Bruce, I see you.
The only problem I see with it, that would certainly make it fair across the board, but I'd hate the thought of losing, like a big tournament or something over a, you know what I mean? I think this board has to have some discretion. That's why we have it. Otherwise, we wouldn't need it. Everybody that's accepted gets 50% off. So I think it's got to be a case by case. We don't want to lose these kind of things in our city over a few dollars. It's just a thought, but I would sure like to give the discretion to the people on the board and let them, I mean, that's what we appointed them for, or you did.
Right.
So just a thought.
Amber?
I can see it working either way. So I think whichever way the council chooses I think is appropriate. I think we should remember that we do have, we have the Visit Casper side of the funding as well, not just the stuff that's coming from the city, but they have other levers that they can use to help make the whole package work for each individual case. So if we feel more comfortable being more consistent in our approach and using some of their, potentially more flexible levers than what we feel comfortable with, I think we can still make things happen. So if we feel better about kind of keeping our parameters where they were and just changing it to this new format, I think that is valid and fine. I think that we can also, you're going to have 2 people on that board. And if we just commit to, making sure that we're staying in good touch about how this is working and how things are going, and, adjusting as needed, I think that would work too. Just whatever.
Go ahead, Bruce.
This is more for you, but so if we stick to the parameters of 50%, there's also money from Visit Casper or Advanced Casper, whoever it is.
Right.
And they could use part of that to buy that down if they, okay, I get it.
If they chose to, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense then, for sure.
But that would also give, I think, what kind of Amber was saying about the latitude of the committee to come back and say, kind of like even, hey, how can we do this, but keep it at whatever, right? The committee could go into those pockets if we needed to.
I'd have to agree with Mr. Cathy then
Okay.
on that point.
So is everybody okay with the 50% on that? Everybody feel okay with that? Okay, and giving latitude to the committee to continue to work. And I think having them come back and having that conversation would be good, so. How's that? Steve did have a question real quick, the vice mayor.
I guess not really a question, just a comment, maybe a suggestion for those that are on the board. It seems like every year we've done this, we come back to the same question, and it's like, well, what was the outcome from the year before? And I don't think we've ever tracked it. We talked about tracking it, but we never have. And so to answer those very questions of what those that we granted these things to, how did they do? If somebody completely flopped, we wouldn't want to give money again. And if you have somebody that was very good at it, you know, if it made its money back or it was successful and drove things in, then we'd want to know that too. But I don't think we've ever done that to this point. We always ask, but it's never been followed up. So I would just ask that, you know, whoever's on the committee, that we make sure that is a final piece, and when it's done, that there's a report made back on how successful or not successful it was.
Go ahead, Fleur, and then I'll get you, Jay.
So in the past years, we've done final reports, and they've only had to report on the number of spectators, but it doesn't delve into how many people from out of town or anything like that. I did provide their final report to Visit Casper, so that is something that they'll be compiling with their own, so that this year there will be reports given back.
Jai.
That was kind of connected to my question. I was just wondering, like, what it takes to get those outcomes prepared. Like, do we have capacity to do that? Does Visit Casper do that anyways? I was just curious about the mechanism for getting that information.
Amber or Fleur, either.
It's my understanding that Visit Casper has a more robust system of being able to develop that data than we would have internally. So I'm optimistic that we'll be able to use their mechanisms that they've developed over the years. And the thing I like about that too is that we'll get a consistent, it'll be a consistent report from event to event to event, rather than asking for a, you know, self-report that maybe they report on one metric and another group reports on another metric, and it makes it really difficult to try to compare them side by side. And I think that we can create a more consistent report so that we're getting the same information from each event, so that we are more able to compare them to one another.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Fleur. You have enough information to move forward?
Thank you.
Just as an add-on, in the packet on the very last page of the application form are about 5 paragraphs of what would be required in the follow-up report, and it is supposed to be turned in within 60 days of the completion of the event.
Yeah.
So the guidelines are spelled out along what Amber was talking about, and so it ought to become very consistent, so.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Do what?
Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah.
Okay, I know we're stretched on time now. We got 15 minutes to cover 3 items, so go ahead, Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the proposals that we wanted to run by you for your consideration is that of extending facility naming rights beyond what we see at the event center in the form of the Ford Wyoming Center to some of our other potentially attractive sites to do the same thing with. The proposal is that indeed we look at a third party to help us hustle those arrangements and deals and make those kinds of things happen. Invariably, what we will find is that a third party or an outsourcing partner would require a piece of the action, if you will, to make those kinds of things happen. And so that fundamentally is the question in 2 parts, if you will. First of all, if you like the idea of extending this to other facilities that we have, this concept. And secondly, if you're comfortable with the notion of us partnering with a third party, private sector party, to help make something like this happen. And so, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we're open to your questions in that regard, and I have Zulima here to help us through this tonight.
Great. Yeah, Bruce.
I would just ask that we table this and explore opportunities for our own staff without a third party to find sponsors for these buildings, instead of paying somebody else to do what we could probably facilitate on our own and save a bunch of money doing so.
Go ahead, Kyle.
Thank you, Mayor. To that point, I think that Spectra's management of the event center has kind of illustrated that a private company does that better than city staff. Nothing against city staff. We have amazing staff members, but they just have different backgrounds, different skill sets. It isn't, going back to my original point, I think Spectra, the arrangement we have with Spectra has illustrated their subsidy coming down year over year, that they're doing better in that regard. And I think Spectra was the one that ended up landing the Ford Wyoming. Are they the ones that facilitated that? So that would be my only point, is that I feel like a third party that does this they have the education, experience, and personnel to carry out something like this is just better prepared and better positioned to do this better than us. But I would support, you know, I am voicing my support. I would love to explore naming rights for other facilities if it can help us subsidize, you know, reduce the subsidies and stuff. I'm all for that. Thank you.
Amber.
I agree with Kyle. I think that it's a great thing to explore. You know, if the money for this is coming out of the sponsorship, we don't lose anything that we don't already have. So it's, you know, it'd still be a bonus for us. But I do wonder, it doesn't seem to me like we have that many facilities that would be likely candidates for this. So I just wonder if we have tried to get those sponsorships ourselves and have not been successful, so have felt the need to partner, or if we just don't want to mess with it and would rather just offload the whole thing.
Vice Mayor.
Zulima, is it possible, I don't know if you can answer this or not, but being that we have Spectra in place, as to what Kyle said, is there a possibility of a partnership there of using Dan up there right now that's doing that to help us in naming these other facilities?
Mayor, members of council, thank you for that question. So currently, Spectra holds the agreement through the management of the Ford Wyoming Center as well as Hogadon to facilitate naming rights and sponsorships for us at those two facilities. So certainly that relationship is already in place, and they do those things for us, and we'll be working a little more aggressively, hopefully, on some Hogadon options for us. With that said, I think that there's an opportunity for Spectra as well as other companies that specialize in this to provide proposals to us so that we can evaluate if that is the best fit, or if maybe there is another company that could provide better services or services at a reduced share. Right now, we obtain these services from Spectra, and their share is 15% of the sponsorship. We have been approached by other companies who are offering 30% of the sponsorship, which of course is less for us and less attractive, but we did feel compelled to go out and see what other companies would be willing to offer in terms of services and what that share would look like.
Bruce.
I'm compelled to agree with Kyle. I read my packet, but it escaped me how that was paid for. So by all means, carry on, and I apologize.
Councilmember, I appreciate your faith in my staff. I believe that they could too, but I do feel like there are professionals that are better equipped to get us the biggest bang for our buck.
Agreed.
Vice Mayor.
And I guess just to bring this up, Carter, can this be expanded beyond just naming rights for buildings? And an example I'll use is parking structure. You've got all kinds of walls in there. People go downtown to obviously shop, and if we utilize those walls to sell advertisement for the spaces downtown, I mean, could it be expanded to that, is the question.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, I would like to see that happen, because, I mean, when you consider the potential marketable space, that begs the question for me even further of the need to outsource that opportunity so that we can be as comprehensive and full throttle with this idea as possible. I think that would eat up Zulima's time and her staff's time way more significantly, particularly if we're going to broaden our horizons like you're suggesting. I like that idea a lot.
Anything else about the facility naming rights? Do you just need a thumbs up from us?
Yes, sir.
All right. Is everybody good? All right. Great job. Thanks, Zulima. On to the raise grant.
Mr. Mayor, real quickly, we're going to make up time here. We are trying to pursue money for a project that we'd like to complete. Many of you are familiar with K Street and the issues that K Street has. We've been able to make a lot of progress in getting that done, but we have a very expensive phase that is yet to be completed that we'd like to pursue grant funding for. We're anticipating the cost of this project to be in the neighborhood of $2.5 million for the scope that you see here on your screen. The RAISE grant is the same thing as the BUILD grant, and you are all familiar with the BUILD grant and that we've tried to pursue that in the past as well. We like the opportunities that this project provides in terms of the parameters this grant requires. And so with your blessing and in your formal direction tonight, we would like to be given the green light to go after these dollars for this project.
And you just need a thumbs up from us.
That's it.
Good to go.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. The 5150 Tourism Development Agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a project that's been underway under the guiding hand of Visit Casper for quite some time. You have had representatives participate in this project as well. But with that, I'd like to defer the time to Visit Casper to walk us through the elements of what the agreement's going to look like if they are here. Does not appear that they're- So we may need to forego this conversation.
Okay.
Thank you.
So
Sorry
we made up
about
a
that.
lot of time there.
Yeah, that's right.
So do we just want to wait and we'll invite them back to
If
come?
that's okay with all of you.
Yep, is council okay with okay. I think we're good.
Thank you.
All right.
Sorry about that.
Agenda review.
Mr. Mayor, I don't really have anything to add to this particular item.
Anybody have any questions or comments about the agenda tonight? Doesn't look like it, so let's go ahead and take a quick break before 6 o'clock. Good evening. We'll go ahead and begin. Before we begin, I would like to remind everyone to silence their cell phones at this time. I now call the March 15th, 2022 regular council meeting to order. The chair would entertain a motion to, by minute action, excuse the absence of Council Member Johnson.
Second.
Moved by Council Member Cathy, seconded by Council Member Pollock. Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, the motion passes.
Council meetings are also televised and can be viewed on cable channel 192. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The chair would entertain a motion to approve by minute action the minutes of the March 1st, 2022 regular council meeting as published in the Casper Star Tribune on March 9th, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Pollock, seconded by Councilmember Nell. Any amendments? Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, the motion passes.
Chair to entertain a motion to approve by minute action the March 15th, 2022 bills and claims as audited by City Manager Napier.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Ingebretson, seconded by Vice Mayor Friel. Any abstentions or nay votes? Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, the motion passes.
Thank you. Now is the time that we invite anyone in the audience who wishes to speak with the council to come forward. As stated on the first page of the agenda, we do ask of the following. Please state your name and address. Direct all questions and comments to the mayor and only the mayor. No personal attacks on the staff or council will be tolerated. Council will not respond to personnel matters. Those will all be referred to our city manager. Questions posed by speakers may or may not be responded to by the council. Presentations will be limited to 5 minutes, and duplication of speakers will not be allowed, and there will be no extensions permitted. Please note that public hearings and ordinances each have their own comment period, so please hold your comments on those items until we reach them. Mr. Sheets, how are you?
Pretty good.
Good.
Thank you, Casper, for letting me speak. I was in Nebraska, and they negated the Constitution by not letting anybody speak non-agenda items, which is completely against the Constitution. I appreciate you guys. We're going to put that on a photograph. Are you going to pass it around? Well, I don't have memory of everyone, but we'll start out with the first one, which is cell sites. It's a master linking code from satellites to cell sites, 1269, and that's kind of a death sentence, that number. And I've been given the chief the DNA fuel piece of paper there, and with forms of human that aren't. And I talked to a doctor today about the difference between animal urine. Cat urine is the one I'm focusing on, and he says I'm right, getting close. So we got that, and then we got the Gulf Ocean. They have a kill line on every one of those oil derricks out on the ocean. You'll see how many of them there are. I think there's 4,500. They clip that oil on every one of those at once. At the same time, hit the Great Lakes with some radiation from those cargo ships. We won't have any more rain. None. Zero. Or fresh water to drink. Same with the freight train. If you put a hot shot freight train, which is nuclear, it's constantly moving. It's a diversion. Movement is a diversion. So if you put a freight train that's nuclear, containers, right next to a cornfield, that's ethanol. That ethanol would be in a nuclear enhancement, along with freight trains along fresh rivers like this one, all of the nation's rivers. If they nuke that, then we have no fresh water, right? And then we have drugs. Tornado shelters is a meth lab, and they're not civilian meth labs, they're government, along with weapons in those tornado shelters along the Great Plains. As well, there's meth labs in the hills, relay stations. They're more northern to coastal. And then you have meth labs on county landfills. And everybody knows here that, I don't know about the rest of you, your high school, but my high school was a drug filter. You could get anything, meth, coke, heroin. So that's where it starts. The judges know it. And, I think the consequences for any drug dealing or doing drugs should be, there's 23 countries that do the death sentence on this, and their kids ain't doing it. Our kids are doing dope, and their kids are practicing with guns. And that's exactly what's going on. And with the rest of that, there's the DNA facts on their fuel. And I put embalming fluid in there. That's what they put in dead people, I think. And I talked to a coroner about that. In fact, that was in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And he told me, if you're a normal human being and you die and you put embalming fluid in you, your veins won't hold that stuff. So it's got to be some sort of plastic and fuel. So I appreciate the speaking, and have a good night.
Thank you, Mr. Sheets. Take care. Any others to wish to speak? Okay, moving right along. I now declare the public hearing open for the consideration of the issuance of microbrewery liquor license number 9. Mr. City Attorney, do you have any exhibits?
Thank you, Mayor. We have 4 exhibits tonight. Exhibit number 1, correspondence from Fleur Tremmel to J. Carter Napier dated February 8, 2022. Exhibit number 2, affidavit of publication is published in the Casper Star Tribune dated March 8, 2022. Exhibit number 3, affidavit of website publication is published in the City of Casper website dated February 16, 2022. And exhibit number 4, liquor license application filed February 4, 2022.
Great. Thank you. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This particular license that you're being requested to consider is a microbrewery license, as was mentioned. It would be assigned to the address at 1015 East C Street. One clarification we want to make that might contradict what you see in your memo there. This would actually be license number 7. Council will recall that in 2021, the cap was removed from these kinds of licenses for cities to consider distributing, and in that regard, you have the wherewithal to distribute as many as you want. So this would be number 7 if it passes this evening.
Great. Thank you. Council will now listen to public comment. Public hearing comments are limited to 5 minutes, and no duplication of speakers will be allowed. At this time, I would ask those individuals who wish to speak in favor of the issuance of microbrewery liquor license number 9 to please approach the lectern. Those who wish to speak in favor. Okay. At this time, I would ask those individuals who wish to speak in opposition to the issuance of the microbrewery liquor license number 9 to please approach the lectern. Those who wish to speak in opposition. There being no one to speak for or against the issuance of the microbrewery liquor license number 9, I now declare the public hearing closed. Chair would entertain a motion to, by minute action, authorize the issuance of microbrewery liquor license number 9.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Vice Mayor Friel, seconded by Council Member Sutherland. Discussion. Oh, yes.
Should we amend this to liquor license number 7?
No, Mr. Mayor, the nomenclature is correct. I just wanted you to be aware of how many you have out there.
Thank you. Any other comments, discussion? Okay, amendments. Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
With Councilmember Pollak's abstention noted and all other council members voting aye, the motion passes.
Thank you. Please read the consent resolutions by title only.
Item 7A1, agreement with Riley Industrial Services Incorporated for the wastewater treatment plant aeration basin pipe recoating. Item 7A2, purchase order for professional services with Andritz Separation Incorporated for service repair and replacement of a dewatering centrifuge at the wastewater treatment plant. Item 7A3, agreement with Wayne Coleman Construction Incorporated for the 2022 CPU asphalt repair project. Item 7A4, agreement with Trado Construction LLC for the senior center parking lot improvements. Item 7A5, contract for professional services with Converge One Incorporated to purchase mobile telephone positions. Item 7A6, submission of a grant application to the United States Department of Transportation for a 2022 Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity Grant for the K Street Bryan Evansville Road project. Item 7A7, accepting the passenger bus agreement with 5150 Tourism Development Incorporated. And item 7A8, contract between the City of Casper and Civil Engineering Professionals Incorporated for the Garden Creek Loop Trail Connectivity Plan.
Thank you. Chair would entertain a motion to adopt the consent resolutions just read. Moved by Councilmember Sutherland, seconded by Councilmember Ingebretson. Sorry. City Manager, would you like to comment on any of these items?
Just a couple quick comments, if I may. Thank you. The RAISE grant is for purposes of having your authority to proceed. You'll see more information on that, but at this step of the process, we are just simply getting your blessing to proceed with an application. Secondly, as it relates to item 7A7, the passenger bus agreement, some of your feedback was with respect to clarifying the maintenance relationship with 5150 and the city. We did put in a dollar threshold that indicated anything less than 1,000 would be things that the city's responsible for, and any other repairs that are over 1,000 would be repairs that 5150 is responsible for. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any abstentions or nay votes? Okay, please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, the motion passes.
Thank you. Council will now discuss the minute action for the purchase of 30 Scott regulators and 5 Scott SCBAs. Because this is not on the consent agenda, it will be open for discussion by council. Please read the minute action title.
Sole source purchase of 30 Scott regulators and 5 Scott SCBAs from the C Western firefighting equipment.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve the minute action item just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Ingebretson, seconded by Councilmember Gamroth. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is council's opportunity to gather more information with respect to this staff request that amounts to just over $92,000 that is inclusive of 30 Quick Connect regulators and 5 SCBAs as a part of this purchase. Mr. Mayor, if it pleases the council, I've asked staff to put together some information as a way of follow-up with regard to some of the lingering questions about this potential purchase. And so if I could defer the floor to Deputy Chief Spicer and Deputy Chief Garvin with regard to some of that additional information. Certainly, if council would like to entertain some questions of staff with regard to what you hear tonight, that is certainly within your purview to do, and staff would be prepared to entertain those if you would like.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening, how's it going?
Good, good. It's good to see you.
So Mayor, Council, we just wanted to present why we're requesting these pieces of equipment. And it's for 30 regulators at a cost of $55,681.80, and then 5 additional full air packs. A total amount of $37,300. So the total sole source purchase from C Western will be $92,981.80. For the past 20 years, the Casper Fire Department has issued a mask per person and a regulator per person. As Chief Garvin's holding here, for the past 20 years, we've been an Avon product called ISI, where it had a built-in regulator and a mask. Everybody's issued their own mask. Because they have to be fit tested, everybody's face is different shape, has a different shape, so they have to be fit tested for those masks, so that's why the mask, and it had a built-in regulator previously. Our new masks from Scott, everything is separate, which has several advantages for disinfection. You can still talk with the mask on, you can hydrate through it, has lots of advantages, And nobody's making the one-piece mask anymore with the regulator built in. So when we put these out to bid, everybody has a separate regulator and a mask. So for the past 20 years, that's been our practice. When we go out to bid this type of equipment or do research, we put a task force together of internal members. It was identified as a critical need to have a regulator per person because it's been past practice. And in light of recent COVID-19 circumstances, disease prevention, it was a high priority for us. These air packs were originally put out to bid with the 30 additional regulators and the 5 air packs, but due to budget, we had to reduce those inventory numbers to come in under budget because we originally were close to that $90,000 over budget on the project. We sent it back out to bid, reducing, took the regulators off and the additional air packs with the intent that we would come back during this capital season and ask for the remaining inventory that we needed. We went into our capitals meeting, and everybody in the meeting initially said it'd be a great use of the CARES funds money. And with that on hand, we thought we could come to council right now and get this critical need addressed as soon as possible. And then, yeah, locally, there's other fire departments that still have the regulator per person, and Trona County Fire does, Mills Fire as well, because they're still in the Avon ISIs, and we have a pretty extensive list of other fire departments in our region that have a regulator per person that have practiced it in the past or have gone to that recently, and most of them have told us that most of the industry is going that direction if they haven't been doing so already. And then Chief Garvin's going to speak to the practical applications and concerns.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, city manager, thank you for your time, your opportunity, and the opportunity to speak. One thing I would just like to reiterate is that unfortunately we don't have a crystal ball and we don't know when our fires are going to come. And some people think that, you know, our air packs are the only time that we ever wear them are during fires, but we also wear them on natural gas leaks. We will utilize them on anthrax calls at the post office, hazmat scenes, things of that nature. So it's not only when we're in the fire that we're going to wear these packs. Sometimes in environments we have to wear them, you know, outside in the regular conditioned space. With that said, you don't know when those calls are going to come. Sometimes they come at shift change. Sometimes we'll be on an incident that lasts hours and hours, if even longer. A perfect example of this would be the Mills fire. Just the other night, March 4th, we had 3 city units. We had a battalion chief out there. We had, and these were all mutual aid requests. So the Mills agency said, hey, can you come help us? So we supplied them with an engine, a fire engine, engine 1, truck 1, which is an elevated master stream, and then we also supplied them with engine 6. Well, and I also went to that fire too. En route, knowing the construction of the building and what building was on fire, we anticipated that that was going to be a long operation, potentially all night and into the next day. With that said, you have to start thinking about all sorts of things like relief of the crews after being on hand lines for 6, 7, 8 hours. How are you going to get them swapped out? Fuel for the trucks if they start to run out. Cold weather. Being able to rehab our individuals, you know, get them into warm weather to take a break for a few minutes, things of that nature. Well, on that specific incident, 1 a.m.-ish or so, we actually started to swap our crews out, our city crew, with other crews. That would be a perfect example of when we had to switch units, trucks, and that would be called a hot swap for our regulators. So we had crews that were wearing air packs or had their air packs with them, and we had to swap crews, and that if you don't have a regulator at that time, then you're going to have to try and disinfect it on scene, which in cold conditions, 19 degrees, cold weather, outside, when you're trying to do things quickly and efficiently, that's not the best time to do that. Also, we have, you know, numerous incidents in my last 20 years on the job of fires that happen during shift change. And at that situation, you hop off the truck, somebody else hops on the truck, there may not be time for you to disinfect those items at that time. So those are just some of the items that I was thinking about, and that a lot of people aren't aware that, you know, we just don't wear these inside fires. We use them on other incidents also.
Great.
Entertain questions, concerns, comments?
Yeah, so I'm going to open it up for questions, and so I want everybody to reserve the discussion portion, because sometimes it gets kind of twisted. So let's do questions, and then when I say we'll go into discussion, then we'll do the discussion portion. Does that sound good? Okay, all right, so we'll start. I'll start with Mr. Steve Cathy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When you swap like this, you're talking about swapping regulators, but I'm assuming at this point, and that's why I'm asking this, but what about the volume of air that's in the tank? If he's been using that tank and then all you're gonna do is swap regulators, isn't he gonna be short of air?
Okay, well, great question.
That's,
So on that scene, we actually had the Natrona County Fire Protection District actually brought out their air trailer so they can fill more bottles. And then likewise, or also, our trucks carry extra air bottles on them, so we can swap those out if you're utilizing that air. So, you know, of course, if you're a new person going into a building, you're gonna try and make sure you have a full bottle of air, well, you will make sure you have a full bottle of air before you go in, but great question.
and the next, as a follow-up, where does this regulator wind up going? Is it on the bottom of the bottle, or does the regulator itself?
Yeah, this is the regulator piece, and it goes, flips in right there, and then this hooks to the air pack.
So it isn't the same then as like a lot of us think about scuba divers, where the regulator is actually on the tank versus next to the mask. So that's why I was curious as to, so in essence, your hose here has full tank pressure on it, and then it's reduced at the mask.
It's actually reduced low, at the beginning, at the bottom, so that the pressure coming in right at the top is not at the full bottle pressure. But the regulator actually has the diaphragm in it, very similar to scuba diving, where your air is going in and out and you're exhaling through it. I don't know if that answers your question or not, if you need one. Okay.
So basically, you're reducing it from the 60, 80, whatever's in the tank, down to the 14 at the bottle, but yet the regulator that's there actually is your check valve and...
Right, so the difference on like scuba equipment is, you can actually unhook your regulator off your scuba tank at the tank, where we just have a disconnect that's farther up. So imagine if your scuba gear, you had a quick disconnect in the middle there to remove your regulator.
Okay, thank you.
Does that help?
It helps.
Okay.
Councilmember Sutherland.
Thank you. A couple of questions, if that's okay. What is the lifespan on those regulators, and does it match the mask lifespan?
You have intel on it?
Yeah, 10 years is industry standard for all the equipment.
Okay, awesome.
It's all under warranty and everything, so.
Okay, thank you. One other. So with the Mills fire, then you were disinfecting on site then?
If they needed to wear them, that fire, a lot of it was exterior, and just because it's exterior doesn't mean you have to wear your mask. I can specifically remember, you would think that like the gentleman that would, I'll think back, this is quite a few years ago, Kentucky Fried Chicken fire on East 2nd Street. There was so much smoke, the gentleman that was actually pumping from the fire truck, so pumping the water to the fire, the guy that actually was standing there was actually having to wear a SCBA because there was so much smoke because he couldn't breathe when he was trying to run the valves on the truck, which was still quite a ways away from the truck. I can't partake or specifically tell you which guys on our crews were wearing air on that fire, because obviously it's a very large building. But in that instance, if those gentlemen that were on the fire had been on shift the whole day, so then we're talking not quite 24 hours, but 1 a.m., they would swap out, and then those guys would come take their packs and everything.
Okay, so they were having to do that.
If they were breathing air, yeah, you would want to disinfect it if they'd been breathing off it.
And that is our procedure. We got to dunk it in a solution of water. And anytime you introduce water to these in freezing temperatures, obviously you're going to increase the chances of malfunction after the fact.
And when he says malfunction, I mean, there's a potential that regulator could actually freeze up when you're on scene.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful.
Councilmember Nell.
I have 3 questions. Sorry. The first one is, does that regulator ever touch your mouth? Does it make contact with your lips, your tongue, any of that?
Your lips, but everything you breathe out or spit or
Right.
sweat, any of that stuff.
But it doesn't actually come in contact with your mouth?
No, this part right here. But
Okay.
everything you breathe, any vapor coming out of your mouth, any germs,
Sure.
any communicable diseases.
Okay. Secondly, how often would you say you guys use an SCBA on the job? I understand when there's a fire, you got to have it, or an anthrax or whatever, but how often, how many of those packs do you guys have?
Currently have 45 of them.
45 packs. How often would you say that they're used?
Daily.
All 45?
Yeah, they get checked in daily. Well, every 2 days when we do shift change, guys have to put them on, make sure, do a systems check, operations check, make sure they work. So they're breathing into them every 2 days.
But how often do you use a unit like on a job? Not checking them, but how often are they actually in use on a job?
Anytime we're training, anytime we're on a call that would necessitate breathing air, we could pull stats for you if you want.
No, I'm just kind of curious how
A
often
lot.
they're used. A lot?
Yeah.
Okay.
Very often. And then, you know, training is a huge ordeal with us, not ordeal, a huge, of utmost importance, you know, because we want to be prepared for anything. So, we train wearing the packs a lot.
Okay. My last question is, did you guys ever seek grant funding for these?
We have not. Through our capitals project is typically how we funded our SCBA's, and we've done that the last 3 cycles. Like I said, this time our budget was short because of COVID and all the dynamics of our economy right now. Going into it, when we had bids going into our capital season, we had more than enough money to get everything we needed, but as it came time to put these things out to bid, they came in significantly higher than we anticipated, and that's why we had to cut that stuff back with the anticipation that we would ask for it again, if possible.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
I have a couple questions to ask, and I'm going to give some information here, so correct me if I'm wrong with any of this. You guys, the CFD switched from Avon to Scott, correct?
Correct.
Okay. The Scott, that's what you have there now. Those regulators, you would actually put on, you have to attach them to that mask, and there is a opening in that mask outward, correct, when the regulator's not on there. On the Avons, those have respirators built into them?
Yep, the regulator is built into it. Everything for simplicity, or for simple form, the diaphragm and everything that would release the air is in this.
Okay.
Already pre-built.
So when you had the Avons before, that's where you refer to, you've had regulators with your mask for every firefighter for the last 20 years?
Last 20 years, correct.
Okay. So then it would be fair to say, because I've made some phone calls and I've just checked on this, but it would be fair to say that Natrona County Fire District have Avon air packs, which would be a regulator and a mask for every firefighter. Mills Fire Department also has Avon packs, which again would be a regulator and a mask for each one. And I believe there was one more. Oh, the Bar None Fire Department also currently runs Avon mask, which would also have regulators built into the mask, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So it'd be fair to say that all the firefighters and each of them said their firefighters all have those, so it would be fair to say they all have regulators and masks.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we move into discussion? Yes, go ahead.
Why did we switch from Avon to Scott?
Avon got out of the SCBA industry, and we identified it as a need because we're having trouble getting parts to replace them, so we bumped the replacement schedule up a little bit. Then like I said, we put that task force together. We looked at Draeger's, Scott's, and MSA's were the 3 major manufacturers out there. We evaluated all of them very thoroughly, and our task force came up with needs that we needed from our air pack. A lot of it, you know, a very big one because of the carcinogens we're fighting fire in was the deconnability and be able to disinfect our equipment. So through all that, and then we put it out to bid. Scott won the bid. Chi Western won the bid with the Scott manufacturer, met all the specs. So that's how we went.
Hold up. What kind of system does MSA have? Do they have the Avon or the Scott type mask regulator combination?
Yeah, all the 3 major ones have this system, a mask with a separate regulator now.
Okay.
To my knowledge, nobody's making the single mask and regulator anymore.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming up. So we'll go ahead and move into discussion and comments. Yes, Councilmember Nell.
Thank you. So I should have been more clear when I said I did my homework and contacted the other departments. The departments I contacted are the ones that are currently using the Scott masks, and they do not have regulators for each and every one. The mask was simply made like this so that it can be shared. So, because it can be taken off and cleaned. Those old masks, the reason they're becoming obsolete and they don't sell them anymore is because you can't clean them. So everyone, even everyone in our department with the Scott has their own mask because they're fit for their face. It's the regulators that are interchangeable, which makes them less expensive and more desirable. That was the whole gist of where I was trying to get before. It's not slighting our fire department to not give each one of them a regulator. They had to have them before because the mask is self-fit and it has to be on there. So my only thing is what I would like to do, just because it's the way Laramie did it, the Laramie Fire Department went to their city council and they asked for funding to get each man a regulator for those Scott masks, and they were denied, and they were told to go and find funding because it's available. That's why I asked the officers or the firemen tonight if they had seeked out additional funding, and there is FEMA money available right now according to the chief in Laramie and another grant funding, and I would like to table this and give our department time to try to go out and find that federal funding that's there and available before we use our general budget, which is also shrinking just like theirs is. There's money available, let's go try to get it. That's been my point the whole time. That's what I would like to see happen.
Councilmember Pollock. Oh, I thought you raised your hand. My apologies. Councilmember Ingebretson.
So this is just a commentary. I believe that the regulators is falling more under safety item. And I know that we recently just lost a firefighter that's been in the business for a great many years and due to cancer. And so I think it's a very bad commentary for the city council to think that we can't spend $92,000 to get these guys their safety items, but you want to approve $750 to change two-way to one-way. And so without looking for grants, when the council asks for grants, but you want them to forego their safety items and go find a grant. And I think that that is in very poor taste for the city council to do that to them.
The discussion. Go ahead.
Thank you. First off, yes, I do want to see the one-way, two-ways changed. And we also asked for them to get grant money, if I remember correctly. And I don't think it's in poor taste whatsoever for me to suggest this, because I'll tell you what can of worms we're opening by not going out and finding grant funding. Every time we have a fireman quit, lose his job, retire, move on, we are going to have to buy a brand new regulator for each and every new fireman that comes through the door. It is not a mandatory request. It is not they keep putting it up to be safety, and it is not a safety issue. Every other fire department with these Scott regulators, they share them, they disinfect them, they work, and those guys are just as safe. So to pretend or even suggest that I am putting their safety ahead of some street project is a crock, and I won't sit here and allow you to do that to me. Sorry.
Sorry, Vice Mayor.
Okay. So, first of all, I want to clarify a few things off of comments that were made last week. Contacting all fire stations or fire departments within the state of Wyoming. There's over 145 of them. I didn't do that because I don't have the time to call them. But what I did do is I contacted our local ones. Bar none, Mills, Natrona County Fire District all have a regulator for each firefighter. They all have a mask for each firefighter. I will jump right on the back of what you just said because I have known, I don't know how many firefighters over the years that have died from cancer. Not saying that having these is going to stop cancer, but it's protective equipment that they need to have. So, to also clarify, it's not Laramie Fire Department that purchased with a grant. In fact, Chief Johnson down there said they do not have regulators per person, have never requested them from their city council, and have never pursued a grant to get them. It is Laramie County Fire Department, which is Cheyenne, Wyoming, which is the same size as Casper. Taking off of a bulletin board that I have access to, it is people within the fire industry that talk about equipment itself and how it works and how it doesn't work. And in talking, one gentleman talking about the Scott air mask itself, he said that while testing the Scott, some of the members of the fire department that were non-smokers could taste the cigarettes after the unit had been used by a smoker, which means that there's an opening in that mask that as a person breathes, it gets into the regulator itself, and you can breathe that back. So if somebody can smell a cigarette on a regulator, then obviously anything else, if they were sick, you could get sick off that same regulator. I just find it asinine, and I again will agree with what you said. We find money like that to go fix projects that are not broken, but when we have equipment that's needed, we're finding a million excuses not to buy it. Well, again, I didn't call all 145. I didn't call everyone in the state, as some people have said that they have done. But right here, phone calls weren't even made to our local fire departments right here, and the answer was right here. They have the masks, they have the regulators per firefighter. End of story. This was needed, this was put out there, but it went over budget. It's being used off CARES funding, which the CARES funding, that is money that was given back from during COVID for reimbursement. It should go to this equipment. I don't know why we continue to have this discussion, but as far as I'm concerned, this is a no-brainer. They need the equipment, give them the equipment.
Got 1 second. Councilmember Gamroth.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to all my colleagues for all the research they've done independently, and thank you, gentlemen from the fire department, for all your information. I'm learning a lot this evening. I have no opposition at all to the protective equipment, having individual regulators for individual firemen. I'm totally on board with that. I think they've done a good job justifying its need. That being said, to Councilman Nell's point earlier, if there is FEMA funding available, and Laramie County has been successful in getting that funding, I do think it would behoove us to explore that. We have CARES funding available, but we have lots of competing needs. If we could access other funding to be able to stretch the dollars we do have, I would certainly be on board with that. So I don't know how quickly we could explore the opportunity to access FEMA granting. I don't know if tabling this for 2 weeks gives the fire department enough time, but if it's available, I would certainly be interested in that. But again, no opposition at all to individuals having individual regulators. Thanks everyone for your information this evening.
Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
I don't know if we can, I know we're in discussion right now, but I have a feeling that one of these gentlemen would be able to answer the question as far as FEMA, whether it can be used to purchase this equipment, what grants could be utilized that you know, and what is the time frame on doing so?
Yeah, so we did research that. It's not FEMA grants, but it's grants to the state that it's ARPA funds. So same big pot of money, I think, from COVID, ARPA funds coming from the state. But the biggest concern there is the process of getting those grants could delay this purchase minimum probably 6 months. By the time we apply for the grant, it gets approved, it goes through legal, we get everything back in front of council. So up to 6 months, I could say it could delay this critical piece of equipment. So yeah, it is available for it. It's ARPA funding is what I was instructed, not FEMA specific, but it was related to the ARPA funds that the state has, which I think they're still trying to debate how to get that money out right now too. So it's the other thing that might hold up the whole process.
Councilmember Kathy.
First of all, I haven't voted no, so I don't know why it says no.
Interesting, Councilmember Kathy.
Yeah, I just noticed that, so thank you for taking that off. A couple of things. Number one, I think most of you know that I am not in favor of two-way to one-way, so don't throw that out there. Secondly, you're right. The other departments in Natrona County have one regulator per person. That is because of the type of equipment That's like going out and saying, I'm gonna put a Komatsu blade on a cat, which isn't gonna fit. That's the discussion we're having right here. Has nothing to do with what the other departments have. So this is strictly a discussion of whether we feel these are needs or wants, is really what it boils down to. And so I'm gonna leave it at that.
Councilmember Pollock.
Thank you very much. And agree with Councilman Gamera. Thanks to everybody who has done the extra digging on this. To me, from the description we were given tonight, it seems like we would already have these if it weren't for the unexpected increase in costs. It sounds like that was a result of all the across-the-board increase in costs around COVID. And that's what the CARES funding was for. That's why we received it. So to me, I think it seems an appropriate use of those funds. Obviously, if there's other funding that is available to us, I'm certainly in favor of pursuing that, but not at the expense of, getting this done in a timely fashion. I wouldn't rely on ARPA funds because I don't think there's a clear timeline on when those are gonna be available to anyone. And I think we're gonna have our shot at ARPA funds down the road. I think we'll be able to reap plenty of those dollars into this community, I hope, for a variety of things. So for me, I'm not an expert in this area. This is not an enormous expense. It's certainly an expense, but in the scheme of what we spend money on, it doesn't seem to me to be something that I feel comfortable, putting my finger on the scale in opposition to, because I'm being told by the people who know that it's something that they need. So that would be my standpoint on it. I don't think we should rely on ARPA. If there is a more readily available funding source, certainly would welcome that opportunity. But otherwise, I do think that CARES funding were distributed for this type of thing, not from even the disinfecting side or the disease mitigation side, but just in the increased costs and the types of impacts that would have on communities. And this being an example of that, like otherwise they would already be operating with this equipment without those increased costs. So to me, it seems to be an easy fit for these funds.
Councilmember Nell.
So here's what I'll tell you. I'm not opposed to you having them. Never was. I was opposed to spending city tax dollars on them. That's been my big hang up on it, because after speaking to the chief at Laramie County, I forgot to put the county in there, there were federal funds that they tapped into to get those. And he's the Scott Tech for the state, I guess, the chief is. I think he also maybe got a better price on them because he does work for them. I don't know, but I know there was federal money, and I do remember him saying it was FEMA. So here's the concession I will make. I'm not opposed to spending the money and getting you these personally, but what I would like to see and set a precedent of is next time we need these, that we explore federal funding for them. I didn't understand that it was a 6-month process, and we certainly don't want to hold you up that long for the safety aspect of it. But what I would ask from you personally is, okay, I'll get behind this and we'll make sure you get your regulators. But the next round, can we please look and see if there's federal funding available? Because I know there is. And I know if you reach out to the chief at Laramie County, he can guide you on how to access it. And from what he told me, there's a certain amount of money allocated for every state, and we have untapped funds that haven't been utilized. And the CARES money, this is exactly what CARES was meant for. This and many other things that we have other needs for. So I'm certainly not going to sit back and make you wait 6 months to get safety equipment that you desperately need. But what I will say is, I'm going to have a really hard time doing this again if somebody didn't try to seek federal funding for this stuff that I know is available out there for this. And I think that's as fair as I could be.
Mr. City Manager, before I make my comments and discussion, I wanted to ask you a couple questions. How much money do we have in our CARES funding right now?
Mr. Mayor, I would say it's just over $11 million.
Okay, $11 million. And okay, so I'm going to put that aside for a second. And did we use CARES funding for the event center promotion thing?
We did.
How much was that?
$50,000.
Okay, If we're gonna sit here and debate $92,000 for equipment that our firefighters need, and we used $50,000 for the event center for promotion for that, we can use $92,000 in an $11 million pot. We should never have been to this point. Our firefighters deserve it, and I think I made my point. We used $50,000 at the event center, and we all were like, yes, that's great, good use of our funding. And we have $11 million in our CARES funding, and we're worried about $92,000 is going to go for life-saving equipment. Shame on us. Thank you, gentlemen.
Call for the question.
Any amendments? Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, the motion passes.
Please read the consent minute action titles.
Item 8B1, purchase of one new 24-passenger bus for use by 5150 Tourism Development Incorporated from Creative Bus Sales. Item 8B2, appointment of Jeff Getz to fill a partial term on the Amico Reuse Agreement Joint Powers Board.
Chair to entertain a motion to approve the consent minute action agenda items just read.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councilmember Eganbretson, seconded by Councilmember Pollock. Any abstentions or nay votes? Please cast your vote. Oh, you're good.
Did I just clear it?
No, that's good. Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, the motion passes.
At this time, we ask council members to bring forward relevant concerns and items of interest. We'll start with Councilmember Gamroth.
Thank you, Mayor. I only have one thing this week. I went to Fort Casper Museum over the weekend to check out the Kerrigan exhibit. Found it really interesting. Lots of really rich Casper history, and I would just encourage people. I think there's a few weeks left in that exhibit, so if you haven't been over there for a while, really cool photos from really early 20s, 30s era Casper, so I'd encourage you to go check it out. Thank you.
Councilmember Eganbretson.
Went to the Parks and Rec Museum, or Parks Committee. We just recently changed the name from Leisure Board to Parks and Rec. So, but some really good things with the hockey and the ice, and so they're looking at doing some different programs and stuff to kind of increase the usage of that sheet of ice, with their ultimate goal of looking at that second sheet of ice. Some great ideas coming through about reusing some of the unused parks around town. So it's a lot of good things out of there.
Councilmember Pollock.
I don't have anything tonight. Thank you.
Councilmember Nell.
A couple things. Joint Powers Board, Water Board meeting today. They're doing some upgrades on the plant, getting ready for their summer flow. They passed some budget stuff, so, and Ms. Sutherland was there for her first meeting today. Yay. And lastly, I'm just going to throw this out there because nothing I hate more than being shamed for questioning anything that I want to, because it's not just my right, it's my duty to question things. And we can weigh one thing against the other and sway any kind of way we want. And I will never stop questioning things. I will never stop asking things. And I certainly don't feel bad about, especially in this situation when there is federal money available. I understand we're sitting on $11 million worth of CARES money, but there's a whole lot of things we need to do, and there's not enough CARES money to do all that we need to do. So when there's federal money available, I say we go get it. And I'll continue to conduct myself the way I do, in spite of it all. That's it. That's all I got.
Councilmember Sutherland.
Nothing from me tonight. Thank you.
Councilmember Kathy.
There was a Joint Powers Water Board meeting, which I was unable to attend due to some family issues. Did make a Finance Committee meeting today that we went over the RFPs for the allocation of our funds between WildStar 1, WildStar 2, and the other investments that we would be making. Also, we got a presentation from Porter Muirhead well, anyhow, the accountants for our audit from last year from FY '21. It is due by the end of May. March, by the end of this month. I knew it was one of those M months. It's due by the end of this month to the feds. Looks like we came through that in reasonable shape. The other thing is I would also have to go along with Councilman Nell's comments is that we don't need to be shamed sitting up here by any person on this council. I'm done. Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Well, I wasn't going to say anything, but I will. There's no shame. Last week, we were asked to do our homework and do our research. That's exactly what I did. Comments were made about phone calls being made that, from what I found in a few of these departments, they never received a phone call. So the information is put out, and if we're asked to follow up on it, that's exactly what I did. So it's not shaming. It's following up like I was asked to. That's all I got.
So in the 8 years I've almost been on council, I've also known that if I take a controversial stance, you got to be prepared to get the other side of it. And that's the way it goes. That's how it goes up here sometimes. It's nothing personal. But when we look at the guys that put their lives on the line for $92,000, their request, we have to look at ourselves and say, what are we committed to? Yeah, we should be asking questions. Absolutely. Nobody said anything about that. But it's the question of when we look at all of the logic behind it, and we look at it and we look at the evidence based upon it by these men and women who serve us and know way more than we do about what it takes to fight fires and other things, we should listen. We do this part-time for $150 a Tuesday. These guys and gals are out there fighting fires and putting their lives on the line. We should be listening to professionals and taking their word. A $92,000 request is not something that's crazy, and especially when we do that. So we can look at that, but when you take a stance, you also got to know the other side's going to be there too. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I don't have a problem with people taking stances, but for you to sit there and say that we all should have been ashamed of ourselves was uncalled for. And it wasn't yours, Mr. Vice Mayor. I appreciate the 2 phone calls and everything, but I don't appreciate being told that we ought to be ashamed of ourselves sitting right here.
That's duly.
That was uncalled for.
I'm sorry you feel that way, but I do not back off that statement. A notice of an executive session to take place at this date and during this meeting was given. We have meetings to discuss regarding litigation and personnel. A matter involving security was also added to the agenda today. Therefore, the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn into executive session, and at the conclusion of that executive session, to reconvene this regular meeting solely for purposes of adjournment of this regular meeting.
So moved.
Moved by Vice Mayor Friel, seconded by Councilmember Pollock. There being a majority of members present and a motion to adjourn in an executive session having been moved and seconded, and that motion requiring a 2/3 majority of the council present, please cast your votes. Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, the motion passes.
A greater than 2/3 majority of the council present voted in favor of the motion. We are hereby adjourned into executive session. Chair to entertain a motion to adjourn from, we are in executive session.